Okay, you hit the record. Perfect. All right, so very happy to be here. Thank you, everyone who's coming out. I know it's been a long week, a pretty interesting week, and thanks for hanging around and coming around to the Friday boot camp day. Obviously, it'll be recorded and distributed to you guys that signed up, but anyone in live attendance gets to ask yours truly any questions they have. So thanks for coming out. I really appreciate it. Jeff Mackey did an amazing job with his presentations on Monday and Tuesday, and so did Kohler on Wednesday and Thursday. So I really hope you guys got some value out of that. So I'm here today to talk about our software, which is Exodus. And what I'm going to basically cover is why I use it and why I use probabilities for trading. And then we're going to look at some of the other tools inside of the software that are really great for creating actionable trading ideas. Because that's a big part of what the software is all about, is generating those trading ideas. So I'm going to jump around a bit, and don't take anything. I won't take anything for granted. If you guys have a simple question, just drop it in the comments section, and I'd be happy to answer it. But if not, I'm just going to kind of flow through and show you guys my favorite tools inside the software. So I did a basic walkthrough before of every tool inside the software, and that's available. We can send you that link if you just want to view that. So this time I'm going to take a slightly different approach and not cover every single thing, but I'm going to focus in very closely on some of the things that I find most valuable. So without further ado, let's go into the market grid. So the market grid is designed to generate idea flow for you guys, trading opportunities. And there's a bunch of different screens here, and they all have different purposes. And the general premise is that you're looking to find out what's working in this tape. So there's a lot of different screens here, and that's what they're designed to do, is ID those areas in the market that are working. And before I go into here, what I like to do is go to the industries page and check out the sectors, because in this page you'll notice across the top we have all the sectors listed. It's taking a second to load. All the sectors are listed up here with this bar chart. So you see your basic materials, financials, tech, and so forth. Financial and tech are the two biggest sectors, and what you can do is you can click on any one of these. I might have to zoom in a little bit so you can see this. Can you see that okay? I'm going to click on the name of one of these sectors, and that's going to pull up the all the industries within this sector. And on this far right, you have a median return column, and I usually set this to 2 week. And then I like to look at the median return and see where it's at. So for financials, it's 4.8%. Before we started this presentation, I went through and looked at all the different sectors to see which outperformed during this bounce on the last 2 weeks, and it was tech. Tech had a median return of 7.65% return over this 2 week period. So it's definitely the strongest industry or sector during this latest rip. So before these prior 2 weeks, we were seeing the larger mega cap type stocks, the Walmarts, the bigger plays like that, participating really well with the market and even having some resilience and some strength. But during these last 2 weeks, it appeared that investors stepped up the risk ladder a bit and went with stuff that's a bit higher beta and stuff that is tech-based, which maybe they like that it's down low to these lower prices. Maybe they just like the short float, the PE. There's a lot of different reasons why. And what we want to try and do with this software is identify a common thread as to what's working within that sector. And that's something that we can do pretty easily with some of these screens inside the grid, which we can use to segue into the screener of the software. So what I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at this momentum screen. This screen is set up, if you hit that little more link below it, it's going to open it up in the screener, and you'll see what this is looking to do. So it's looking for stocks that are up over 2% on the session and within 1% of their session high. So it's looking for stocks that are being accumulated intraday that are holding on to their gains, suggesting there's some momentum on these positions. And there's also a filter here for average volume over 500,000 shares. But what I want to do is I want to add in this sector so that I can just look for the stocks that are in the tech sector. Since it's performed the best over the last 2 weeks, it would make sense that these could continue to outperform. If we continue rallying, these would be picks that would make bigger moves than some of the other stuff. So we know tech had the biggest moves. And already when we switch it to tech, I have to add in average returns over the last 2 weeks so we can see what's going on here. All right, so you notice I can type anything into this search column on the screener, and I type return, for example, and now anything that says return in it is going to pull up here to the right, and I can click whichever one I want. In this case, I want the 2-week return, and then I'll hit go, and it's going to bring it down here as a column. Okay, so 2-week return, you can see at the very bottom, on this momentum screen, the median return was almost 11%. So the sector overall, over the last 2 weeks, was up 7.65%. And that's something I pulled from the industry screen, looking at the actual sectors overall. Let me see if I can load it up real quick, just so you know where that information came from. So if we just look at the 2-week return of the whole tech sector, it was 7.65%. When we look at the tech sector, what's showing up on the momentum screen, you have a median return of 10.98%. So we're on to something. And if we wanted to look for other common threads or what types of stocks are participating, which ones are getting the action, we can look at all sorts of things. We could look at PE ratios. We could look at, down year to date and see what common thread ties all these different stocks together that are outperforming. And so, for example, let's look at short float. So I typed in short there, and here's short as percentage of float. So this is looking to show us stocks that are heavily shorted. Shorted meaning that participants are betting against them by borrowing shares from their brokerage with the bet that they can buy them back at lower prices in the future. So when price starts to rally in a stock or any instrument that has a high short float, those short sellers are like tinder to that stock, because as it goes higher, they're getting margin calls where they have to send more funds to their brokerage to maintain that position they have. Otherwise, forced liquidation will take place. So there's a bit more natural demand built into these stocks that have a high short float. So it was at about 10.98% 2-week return before we had this short float. So let's look at positions on this momentum screen, or stocks on this momentum screen that have a short float over 15%. And you can see the 2-week return goes up now nearly to 14%. We have 13 stocks here. So you could just sit here all day and hit Control-R and refresh this screen and constantly be fed ideas if what you're looking to do is trade some momentum intraday. These are stocks that are on the move already. They're being accumulated. They have a high short float. They're in a sector that's been working, and they're holding on to their gain. They're within 1% of the high. So this, just like that, it's a tool that you could build to generate actionable trading ideas. And this could be done a bunch of different ways. And you could save this by hitting this save screen. You wouldn't have to rebuild it every single time. You could give it a name like momentum sector, momentum in sector with short float, and a little description. Looks for stocks that are heavy shorts, heavily, it's been a long week, heavily shorted in a given sector. And save that. So now that screen is saved. We could access it in the screener by clicking My Screens and then finding it. Or we could click our username in the top right, go to Our Screens, and it'll be right there. And this screen will always have different stocks in it because the system is continuously updating with new quotes throughout the day. And for now, you're going to have to hit Control Refresh to get this thing to continue to update throughout the day. But coming soon, we're going to have the live data streaming in, so you won't even have to do that. You can just keep this open, and it'll be popping up new tickers as they become available to these criteria. And if you just think about what that is, that's a really great way to consistently and objectively generate trading ideas. Because you can say, all right, I've taken 30 trades from this screen. I give them a 5-day holding period or a 2-day or whatever you do. This is the average return I get. And I have that time-based stop, win, loss, or draw. And you're objectively trading. And that's the primary goal of this software, is to give you data that allows you to, A, generate your own actionable trading ideas, and B, be objective about it. So this is just one example of how you could do it. This is like your personal laboratory. So you could come in here and you could spend hours looking at different stuff. You could look at, maybe it's the PE ratios that have compressed and gone quite a bit lower that have an outsized performance. So you'd click PE and you'd bring that in. Or you could look at stocks that are down 20% or more year to date. These are just all different ideas. The key is just working with this screener and getting familiar with how it works. So the high level of that is you have all these different categories on the left, and you can either click through them and see what they say. You could add a PPT score, like a technical score, to look for stuff that only is ranked very highly technically. You can click through and get different things like stock returns. So you have these different categories, and then these are the different things you can select. And then if you hit go, it brings them down here as columns, which you then can toggle by clicking on these little funnel-shaped icons to the right of each column header. And that's where you can go in and manipulate what exactly is being looked at by that screen. So that's super important. That's one of the most useful ways you can use this software, is to use this as your laboratory for generating these actionable trading ideas. So does anyone have any questions about that? How that works, or the mechanics, why it works, what's going on there? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. Another thing I wanted to point out back on the grid was that we made some changes to the free cash flow model portfolio screen. So if you go to grid and you scroll down and you find the free cash flow, it's the last one on the bottom right. This was modified because with these screens, we're trying to find what is working in this market. And so the trailing 12-month free cash flow was up to 100 million. I believe it was 75 million before. So that was upped, and the PE ratio was dropped down a little bit because these stocks have come down in price, to try and find what's been working. And if we add in the returns for the last 2 weeks, we can see how it's done. So I just typed in return, hit 2-week return on this check mark, green go button. That's going to give me the column I want. And we can see these are up about 7.08% over the last 2 weeks. So that's roughly in line with what the SPY has done. But it's doing better than it was before the adjustments were made. So that is one of the ways that I like to use this software to generate idea flow in a way that I can consistently execute on. The other way, and if you just want to take the algo signals that are built into the software, those are the macro algo signals that are built into this market tab. So this is, let me go to the historical tab here. This is what we consider the mother algo. It's running on over 4,000 stocks and another 1,000 ETFs, and it's scoring all of those instruments on a technical basis, meaning technical analysis. So it's looking at the price action, the volume, and the volatility of these instruments. We then also incorporate the fundamentals of all 4,000 of those companies. So every company's fundamentals are ranked. That data is married together, and then we use what's called a sub-rosa scoring system to also include interest rates, commodity prices, and currency values. All of that data goes into the 36-month hybrid score. And that's shown all throughout the software. You can see it on the top right here next to your username. It's 2.84. It's on the navigation pane here in the bottom left as a meter. And you can see where the thresholds are on this one. And then if you click Market and you go to OBOS, you can see the historical stats when this thing has signaled. So the hybrid oversold has performed incredibly well over the last 3 years, a 74% win rate, and it's really this year been shining, especially given the extreme circumstances we've had to start the year. It's been doing a really good job of identifying those stress points. So if we want to see when the historical flaggings have been, we can click this historical page on the market link, link here in the navigation pane. It's going to give you this screen. And on this screen, you can see on the last column on the right when the last times were that we flagged hybrid oversold. So look at this. Look at this. Let's go back a page more. So this right here was the beginning of the year. And you can see this thing was flagging hybrid oversold almost every day on the 36-month. And what we saw at the beginning of this year was extraordinary. Those were not normal conditions. And what happens when we go through something like that is the software goes through a learning period. So you'll notice if you look at this second to last column, it says signal threshold. The threshold itself began to adjust lower given this new information that was coming in. And that's something that some people misunderstand. They think that these thresholds are adjusted manually, but they're not. This is all done automatically by the software as it takes in more information. So you can see the signal threshold went from 2.41 all the way down to 2.39 by the time it was all over. And you can actually look, the Fly has been trading this strategy exclusively inside the software this year to highlight how even through these types of conditions, it can do pretty well. So he just did a blog that's updating his year-to-date P&L based on that. And you can see that he's positive year-to-date, 1.35%, despite this learning period. And what really helps this algo to not get caught into a serious drawdown is that the risk is mitigated by the time stop, the 10 trading days. So win, loss, or draw, when 10 trading days are up, you're booking the position. So if we look at this 36-month hybrid, it adjusted from 2.41 to 2.39. Now if we go to the next page, which is the most recent action, this is where it gets really interesting. Because if you look at February 2nd here, the hybrid score on that session, on the close, was 2.40. So historically, had the algo not adjusted itself, you would have been getting in that next trading session at 191 on the SPY. Do you guys see that? Instead, it didn't flag until all the way down at 185, absolutely nailing the most recent inflection point. And that's what this thing's ultimately trying to do, is time inflection points in the market. So I think anybody would be happy if they had gotten into the SPY at 185, considering today, when this last signal just completed, we're up at 195. We were a bit higher even on the open when the position was closed out. So you can, like I said, you can go to the Fly blog inside Exodus, and you can see the details of all the trades that have been taken by the Fly on this signal. So it's all being done live. None of the thresholds are adjusted manually. And if you go to this historical tab on the market grid, you can see when every single hybrid oversold has ever occurred. And if you click it and you put it to historical hybrid oversold, now you're going to see every single signal that has been generated since the software was started. So if we sort by this column, you'll see there's a ton of data when you go to historical, so it might not sort, but you can see that the historical, which is only flagging in a bit more extraordinary circumstances, the historical has a lower threshold. It's all the way down at 2.33. Hold on a sec. This thing's freezing up a bit. Reload it. I think sorting that column was a bit much. Okay, so if we go to the second page, you'll notice that the historical algo, because I think we can all agree that those were extraordinary times to start the year. I mean, we had oil collapsing. We had whole sectors getting dismembered. Stocks trading down 40, 50% on analyst downgrades. Like the non-systemic risk was through the roof. During that time, the historical algo performed almost flawlessly in 2016. Look at this. It did not flag once until we got down to 188 on the SPY. So you weren't caught up in any of that drawdown that happened from the start of the year up at 201 and a half, or a little bit less, 201, all the way down to 188. It performed extremely well through all of that. So that just speaks volumes to me at how effective this algo has been at identifying those stress points where we're looking for, and given the time stop, you really mitigate the risk of the trade, especially in this environment where, not necessarily this week, but the weeks before this have been pretty rough, and it's done a pretty good job. There's something else I want to show you too. This is, let me blow this up. This is every single signal that occurred in 2015. So you can see the dates here, 1/6, 1/15, and so on and so forth. This is every time that the hybrid oversold flagged for the year. And it had 21 wins and 5 losses. It performed extremely well last year. And it had a return overall of about 20% on a year when the SPY was more or less flat. So you can really see that this thing has performed really well, especially lately in these more aggressive two-way type markets. So if this is another way that you can go about using the software. This is one of the main ways I'm using the software is to trade these oversold signals. Now, does anyone have any questions about accessing this data, where it is, when to trigger, when to initiate your position? I know we talk about it quite a bit in the community notes, so maybe it's clear already, but if you guys have any questions about it, let me know. So this one right here, this most recent one that happened on February 8th, it was a hybrid score of 2.28 on a closing basis. The threshold was 2.39. So that next trading session at 185.43 about, that's where we closed the day. At about 185, you were initiating positions with now nearly $10 of upside since then. So, I mean, it's just done an incredible job of nailing these inflection points. All right, let's see. All right, I went over a couple of ways that I like to use the software. Let's look at some other stuff. So back on the industries page, let's look at some of the stuff I like to use intraday to gauge what's going on, if a rally is going to stick or if it's going to give way. There's a few things I like to look at. So on the industries page, I'm always looking at this bar chart across the top. This is showing you the intraday performance of each sector. And remember, when the live quote starts streaming in, this will be adjusting automatically. So this will be even more interesting. But for now, you can always hit Control-R to refresh it. And I like to see, if we're rallying, ideally I want to see the financials and tech participating in that move, because they're the two largest sectors. We know that. And if we don't know that, that information is on the dashboard. So let me show you where that's at real quick. I know that because I've seen this a couple times, but let me just show you why financial and tech are the two biggest sectors. So if you go down on the dashboard a bit, you'll see right here the market cap of each sector. Financials make up almost 20% of the entire market, tech 23%. So those are two huge, huge sectors. So I want to see those sectors participating both ways. If we're having an up day, I want to see these participating with that. If I come in here and it's the morning and the NASDAQ has rallied, 40, 50 points, but I notice that financials are red and utilities up 1.5%, I'm saying, okay, this is not a risk-on type rotation today. I'm going to call that early rally into question. I might look for some intraday shorts based off of that. Something else that I like to look at to gauge the participation with the rally is this market breadth number on the market overview pane. So there, like I said, there's over 4,000 stocks in this software, and this market breadth number is showing you what percentage of those stocks are up on the session. So right now, it ended the day at 61%. So it wasn't really that broad of a participation day. Just over half the stocks were up. What did we do today? We gapped up and faded lower all day. So that makes sense. That breadth was about 50-50. Conversely, if it was over 80% after that gap up, that would say, okay, buyers are likely to step in and defend this gap up and keep pushing higher. The breadth, the participation in this rally is very strong. I like this breadth number more. There's some other places you could get breadth from, but they're not quite as all-encompassing as this number because it's every single stock in our universe of Exodus. So that is something I'm always looking at. So what else do we have? Excuse me. Community Notes is great. It's been very vibrant lately. We got a lot of people in here. The idea flow is better than ever. Everyone's talking about how they're trading the signals, what's prompting them to execute. They're posting their entries, their exits, and all of that activity goes into this trending tickers area to the right. So you can see which tickers in the software are getting clicked on the most and are seeing the most discussion. So you'll often see the ticker symbol FLY in here. That's because that's usually used to address the admin, whether it's a request to add a ticker or a technical question. So that's not necessarily trending because there's something going on there. Everything else is a different case. So that's just something to keep in mind. You also see your baskets here and a breadcrumb trail of where you've been. So you can see all the different stocks you've been viewing recently. I like this because sometimes I forget what I was looking at. I've been looking at some weird stuff. I was looking at all these short ETFs. I kind of wanted to get short this week. So I ended up with, at the end of the week, getting QLD. So I'm short the Qs going into next week. And the reason I am, there's twofold. We'll talk about it since we're in here. I do the every Sunday at noon, I put out the Exodus strategy session. And I sit down and I literally spend 4 or 5 hours going over a lot of the data here in the software, and then I score each index. So you'll see that kind of right here. You'll see my score for the ES, NQ, TFYM. So it's S&P, the NASDAQ, the Russell, and the Dow. I score all of them, and then I compare that average score to the Exodus hybrid score, and I look at the spread. And that's what I do every week on this bias model. And when that spread's greater than 0.5, for me that's a short bias. And so that triggered this week, which led me to write this thesis, which was look for a bit of buying momentum to follow through early next week, then expect sellers to reemerge after the Tuesday morning consumer confidence reading at 10 a.m. That literally played out almost perfectly. If you look at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, you'll see the sellers stepped in aggressively. The other thing was, what was it, Wednesday or Thursday, we came right back up through the level that sellers acted at, which was 4,200. I wrote a piece on it. All right, so that was Thursday. So either way, it became a useful pivot on the week. I did remain short the QLD into next week, for better or worse. The one reason was this Exodus strategy session data, all my research. The other reason, and I know a lot of people aren't trading this yet, but I like to have a balance and trade in short, and we flagged hybrid overbought. I believe it was not this week, but last week. Let me see. So I'm going back to the historical screen, going to the OBOS time frame, and I'm going to 36-month hybrid overbought. This thing hasn't triggered in a while, but it could have something to do with the way the thresholds recently adjusted. It triggered Wednesday. So I came in on the tail end of this, and although the hybrid overbought doesn't have incredibly successful stats yet, if the market is in fact changing its behavior, you'll see these overbought stats start to improve. So right now the average return going out 10 sessions is positive, and considering this is an overbought signal, we'd want to see this average return be negative. That's not the case yet, but as more signals start to come in, if the market begins to trend lower, you'll see the percentage up go way lower on these stats, and you'll see this start to perform much better. So that is the other reason I took the short, and it hasn't really, same idea. It's mitigated by the 10-day holding period, which, considering I came in on day 6 or 7, I only have about 3 days left on that trade. So let's look at some other stuff. The flies indices are very, very useful for getting an idea of if risk is really starting to fly off the table. So there is this risk appetite index, okay? And this represents institutional bond holdings, high-grade corporate debt. It's a bond, basically a giant bond fund. And if this thing starts to head lower alongside something like the bubble basket, something like the bank index, if you start to see the risk appetite heading lower, then you know we could be in for some trouble. But as of right now, all these different bond funds that are represented in this index, you can see it's been pretty stable. So no major reason for concern yet, at least per this index. Does that make sense to you guys? Do you have any questions about that? We can look at some other ones. We have the bubble basket. This is looking at stuff that has very, very high valuations, little to no profits whatsoever, high price, like a lot of these PE ratios not available. These companies don't even have earnings. And you'll see, but if you look at the median return over the last 2 weeks, it's over 10%. So the market's up 7%, and these bubble basket type plays are up, 3 additional percent. So that's what's been working recently. And that kind of goes back to what I was showing you with the screener and how you use the screener. We're looking to use this tool set to find what's working and where that outperformance is occurring so that we can trade alongside of it. And that's how you're going to get the actionable individual stock picks out of the software. So let's see, what other indices are there? There's a whole bunch here. The GARP portfolio is great. That's performed very well off the bounce. I believe it's up, let's see. I don't know if I was supposed to, oh, okay. Yeah, it's up 8%. All right, so that was up 8.7% the last 2 weeks. So pretty good. Pretty good. Let's see, what else do I use? Those are the main things I use. Let's see. Seriously, do you guys have any questions so far? Let's open it up. Let's get some Q&A going. This can't all be crystal clear to you. I mean, maybe it is. I know I do a pretty good job of explaining it, so it could all be crystal clear as day. This is nice. Recently added tickers, so if you have a ticker that's not in here that you want added, you can just let us know and we'll add that ticker to the software. The most exciting thing that's coming up is that we're going to have those live streaming tickers. So the data is going to be streaming in here live, and that's going to be a major update that comes absolutely free of charge to all you guys. So that's going to be really, really exciting. I'm pretty excited about that myself. Be sure you check out the Exodus Strategy session on Sundays. That is major. Okay, let's see. Let's look at an individual stock, and let's just look at some of the tools you have available. Let's pull up an ETF, actually. Let's pull up this QLD. That's the short, the Qs. That's the position I'm in right now. So we just added this feature. It's really cool. These last two columns, just like the historical page on the market, you can look for individual stocks now, and you can see where the signal threshold is and when the last time was that it flagged. So we can sort. I can see all the times this was technically oversold. So considering this is an inverse ultra ETF, you have to kind of wrap your brain around the directions that's going on here. When this is oversold, it's suggesting that the NASDAQ, as represented by the QQQ, which is the NASDAQ 100, that it's overbought. So a tech oversold on an inverse ETF would be a short sale opportunity. But going along this is the equivalent of being short. So you can see all the different times this is flagged. It's very cool. And you can do this for all the stocks. Facebook and Apple, they just had great flagging going on recently. Let's look at Facebook. Look at this. Who wouldn't want to be in Facebook sub 100 going into the weekend? 108. 108. So this is this is a sweet tool. You could just trade based on these two. Either way, what I want you guys to do is know all the different ideas or ways, the methods you can use to go about finding these actionable trading ideas and being objective about it. So you could go off just these oversold signals. You could go into the grid and start looking for those common threads of what's working, what's not working. Either way, you want to set up these screens and you want to identify that that's why you're taking the trade, what you're going to do to get out, whether it's a simple 10-day holding period, win-loss draw, or something more advanced like if we hit a moving average. You could really get as creative as you want. I recommend keeping it simple. But either way, it's just having that consistent objective approach. A lot of times back in the day, people would want to come into Exodus just to get the fly picks. They thought that was how they got the actionable trading ideas. But what we're trying to do is empower you guys to use this software and create your own reasons and have a good, meat behind why you're doing it. And that's how you're going to get the actionable trading ideas without just being reliant upon, the guru model. So I personally think that it's a much more sustainable approach to trading because you're using data, which is very objective, and it's your data, so you're not calling it into question like, oh, well, I'm only in this because, some guy, this guy's in it, he's good, but is he that good, so it's gonna mess with your confidence, where if you're just trading based on data you have, you're tracking your trades and you're being consistent, you're going to find that gets you a long way down the road to being consistently profitable. So I showed you guys how the thresholds automatically adjust on the mother algo, the macro algo. I showed you guys how to build some screens, some basic screens, and how to look for a common thread in what's working. And we've looked at some of the baskets, we've looked at some of the fly indices, we've looked at the community notes. That's about it, fellas. I know it's late. It's about 7:45 here. It's Friday. If you guys don't have any other questions, I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Does that sound good, guys? We cool on that? I'd like to say thanks again very much to everybody who's in here. I know it's been a long, weird week, and you came out. Thank you for signing up for the IBC BootCamp. Hopefully this was helpful. You can reach out to me on the blog. I'm iBankCoin.com/Raul3, and you can ask me questions there. Or you can shoot me an email. My email is vince@blacklightanalytics.com. It's all one word, Blacklight Analytics. So you can shoot me an email. You can hit me on Snapchat. Snapchat handle is vcali, VCALI. Be happy to answer your questions there too. And seriously, anything, because I am the Exodus concierge. So my job, or one of my jobs here at the site, is to ensure that your experience with the software is as positive as possible. So no question's too simple. No question will rub me the wrong way. Just ask me anything. I really don't care. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Boop.